Good afternoon. The other day I ran some Star Trek Adventures for Jason of Dark Age of Roleplay, Aloy, a friend from G+, and Anthony of Runeslinger, another YouTube channel about RPGs. And this was a really outstanding opportunity for me to play with a really solid group of folks that really had skills that I do not have skills as a game master as far as trusting that level of experience and ability to make good use of session time. And that's something that I underestimated. There's a number of other things that, positive and negative, that I underestimated about my own style and about sort of the nature of the game as far as pacing. My desire for a really kind of positively concluded session that embraced all the prep that I had done perhaps was not in the strongest of continuity with how much time we had available. It did provide the opportunity for everyone to experience a number of different parts of the rules and to kind of get a handle on how those parts of the rules worked. And as far as Anthony is getting ready to run his own game of Star Trek Adventures, I think that that was positive. And as far as Jason sort of flirting with Star Trek Adventures and looking at the quick start, he saw that much more that was beneath the surface and was interested by that. But at the same time, I have a new chance to look at kind of my strengths and weaknesses as a game master and as a narrator. And in this video, when I'm off here looking in this direction, it's because I'm reflecting. This is something that Runeslinger and Jason and Ivan and a number of RPG channels do, which is they kind of give their reflections on how the session went and kind of the nature of play, and some reflections on, what works, what doesn't, and where to grow. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, stay tuned. I'm the Complex Games Apologist. So the very first thing to say is that I over-prepared. I made a lot of stuff for this game, and I was anticipating maybe a 3-hour, 45-minute playtime and the ability to edit out scenes. The thing, though, that I didn't anticipate was that the command decision, the main chance to say, I'm going to take this part of the story that I had planned out so that there's more agency and more freedom in the time that remains, was something that I didn't have a lot of experience with, in large part because I don't prepare to this level of visual flair and sort of this level of depth as often as you might think. And so having that preparation there led to a desire for me to see it all get on screen. And I knew that we had to have a satisfying conclusion to the orders that were delivered. So something in the middle had to come out rather than something at the end. So we quickly passed by the opportunity to either abridge the beginning or to abridge the middle, and then we were in that third act that needed kind of all of its I's dotted and T's crossed. And this is a lesson that I think I pass on to everyone. First of all, specifically about Star Trek Adventures. It's a game that plays fast. Absolutely. And that means that maybe you're going to end up preparing kind of more discrete scenes, especially if you follow my kind of close embrace of the scene economy. But a thing to think about is maybe also preparing a little quick sheet of where you are willing to take things out or where you're willing to add things. That second half, I did have some things in mind, especially as far as the threat spend, to bring the Klingon cruiser back into the picture as kind of a complicating element. Not as a battle, but as something that would, change the board a bit. Second thing is that narration faltered. In many places, I assumed kind of a course of action once the players had arrived at something that was close to correct, and I moved on. And this allowed the tutorial aspect of this game to continue. But I missed the chance to learn about how to use NPC crew members to create in-genre exposition and in-genre immersion. And this is a technique that I saw on the G+ group for Star Trek Adventures, and it's something that I think is really positive. It's just essentially having an NPC sensor operator say, The enemy has moved into close range and their shields are active, sir. The enemy is charging weapons. They are preparing their transporters. This is, just simply saying the class and the type of vessel in character can do that much more, and especially implying the fear and the sort of imperative need for command and action that subordinate and junior people have from the experienced kind of bridge senior staff protagonists of Star Trek Adventures is a place where I could improve. Values and determination made a very strong showing, however, in the closing act, once everyone had gotten used to what their characters were and saw the need as the difficulties were escalating. And this is a place where I think that being open to very high difficulty tasks is something important. It's something that can be very useful, especially early on in sounding out characters. I did use proposed value complications, and I did spend threat to create kind of character complications, including emotional states. And those went over very well. I had some insecurity about that idea that the game master could end up role-playing the player characters by doing so. But instead, it sort of reflected the state of play. One character made some relatively poor rolls, and some things that should have been basic, and it led to a flagging confidence complication. And that actually played out very well in the narrative, especially as it allowed them, once they recovered themselves and they found their center again, to provide some useful advice and some kind of pats on the back to another character who was suffering a different sort of obsessive complication. That really resembled a lot of what I enjoyed from Next Generation Star Trek. And the thing that I've learned as I've studied more of original series Trek is that it was there. The people who were having trouble, the people who were flagging in their duty or in their confidence, were not the leaders on original series. They were often the subordinates that folks were responsible for, or guest stars whose survival could be really up in the air. And that's one of the interesting and fun things about this one-shot environment that was positive, was that the success of the mission, so long as it kind of reached close to the conclusion, could be pretty variable. And the seriousness of the challenges and sort of the elan in approaching the challenges was something that really was fascinating and fun. And and you'll look at the Runeslinger player reflection video and Jason's player reflection video, you will see that they started really latching onto the idea that we're acting like Star Trek people. It feels like Star Trek is happening. And once I noticed that was occurring, which is somewhere around where the minefield and the approach to the orbital was starting to happen, I could have stepped back, and that could have provided a more satisfying and less board gamey experience. I had so many play aids, I had so much preparation, so much ability to move on to the next thing, that dwelling on the thing that we were in could likely have provided a more positive experience. Star Trek Adventures can move at a pace which is dizzying in a way that other RPGs naturally will take their time. The mechanics are bold and beautiful, but you can go too boldly as the game master, because it's often the task of the protagonists to be the ones doing the boldly going. And that's an important lesson, especially if you have good players that are really, once you see them getting underwater, in the trust that the system can see them through some really difficult stuff, to let them get underwater and even grasp for air a bit. And this is the place where the system, I think, has the robustness and the depth to really fulfill as much promise as Fantasy Flight Star Wars has, as far as, duplicating genre and fueling campaigns. There's some criticism of this game when it comes to, how much experience and how much leveling up you can do. And I gotta say, there's so much maturing, there's so much growing into, there's so much evolving to be done on the bridge and among the ship and the crew that I don't, again, just like from my review, several months onward, I think that I'm as excited to play a full-length campaign of Star Trek Adventures as I was when I shot the review. That's saying something. And the really interesting and cool thing about this game that I think I'm beginning to trust more is that if you get people that know Trek well and are interested in this game and are also role players from elsewhere, once they see this game working, they really get into it. You can trust that your players will become really good at doing the thing and also reinventing the thing in their own way. I see so much mistrust of this game when it comes to the military sci-fi aspect of it. There's a lot of mistrust of this game when it comes to players goofing off and not acting Starfleety. And in general, I think I think in most cases misplaced, because most of the time when people do that sort of thing, it's because they're bored and they don't feel the narrative is moving. And you can always buy dice with threat. You can kind of aid each other. You can spend your determination to really finish something. You can be out of gas. You can sort of need the story to respirate after you do it. But sitting on your hands and getting to the point where you go to a bar or rob a city guard or kind of the various stereotypes of a bored player character in fantasy, after a second group of people sat down to play the game and on their first time playing together, played the game kind of towards its center of gravity and in a way that was, really left a buoyant feeling of spirit, I think that you don't need to worry so much. If you've got Trekkies at your table and you've got role players that know how to use mechanics and when not to, then I think you've got yourself a good game coming at you. I will say this, and this is tangential, is that I think that my own ability to kind of let things happen without die rolls and, my choices about what's a task and what's not a task are maybe better placed than I have thought so far. I've recommended the idea that, you don't need to roll all the time and not everything is a difficulty 1 or higher task. And the more that I read about difficulties in the game or places in the game where something is overpowered or underpowered, I think it comes down to how often people are thinking that they can roll the dice, how often they think dice rolling can replace narration. Now this is the thing that I need to learn, is to let the players do that narration, to let the players kind of connect the dots to the next place that the ship and the crew needs to do to fulfill the mission. Because boldly going is the theme of this game. And I think if you watch the player reflection video of the other folks, you'll see a similar thread. So I hope you have a great holiday, and I've got another video which I'm going to hopefully put up this week about some Starfinder stuff, because I know not everyone is here for Star Trek, and that should be coming kind of concurrently or just after this video. Take care.